All right, well, hello everyone. This is Rebecca Dallin with the City of Oklahoma City Stormwater Quality and COSWA, the Central Oklahoma Stormwater Alliance. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to this special training event. We will be recording this session today and it will be available later on our YouTube channel, so we'll post a link to that later today. Everyone online, if I have your email address, you will receive a certificate of attendance for today's session. Please make sure that you share your name in chat if your user ID on Teams doesn't show your full name. And also let me know if you have more than one person watching on the same computer so I can get everyone a certificate. I'm going to put my name into chat, or my email address into chat right now. So if you have any questions about certificates or haven't received one within 2 days of this webinar, feel free to email me again, or if you have more than one person, or if you just don't get one, keep my email address handy so I can make sure and get you a certificate of attendance if you need one. We would also like to make sure that everyone keeps themselves muted during the presentations. If you have any questions, please type them into chat, and I'll be monitoring chat and let the speakers know when we have questions and make sure that we get as many questions answered as we have time for today. We do have 3 presentations with 4 graduate students as our guest speakers from Oklahoma State University. Our first presentation will feature Maliha Tabassum's presentation entitled Stormwater Management for Historic Sites, a case study on green infrastructure at Washington School in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Maliha is a second-year master's student in civil and environmental engineering at Oklahoma State University. She is from Bangladesh and received her bachelor's in civil engineering from the University of Asia Pacific in Bangladesh. Currently, she is working with the Schussler Stormwater Lab and Fultz Research Group as a graduate research assistant. Her research focuses on the hydrological modeling of green infrastructure as a solution to urban floods. Maliha's research project is to investigate and develop a green infrastructure plan to revitalize the historic Washington School in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Our second presentation is a joint project of Nisha Bhatta and Megan Ryan, and it's titled From Runoff to Renewal, Restoring the NOC Enid Stormwater Pond and Green Space. Nisha is a second-year civil engineering master's student at Oklahoma State University, specializing in water resources. She is working as a graduate research assistant in the Schussler Stormwater Lab at OSU, where her research focuses on stormwater modeling using green infrastructure. Currently, she is developing a green stormwater infrastructure plan to restore the storage capacity and the water quality of a stormwater pond located at Northern Oklahoma College in their Enid campus. Prior to joining OSU, Nisha received her bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Kathmandu University in Nepal. Nisha is passionate about water resource management, particularly stormwater and urban flood management, through the implementation of nature-based solutions. Presenting with her will be Megan Ryan. Megan is a first-year environmental science master's student at Oklahoma State University and a graduate research assistant in the Schussler Stormwater Lab. Megan grew up in Alberta, Canada, and has always had a love for the outdoors. Her current research is being conducted on Northern Oklahoma College's Enid campus on their pond and green space, where she is working to improve community engagement and recreation while developing a plan to restore the urban ecosystem. Prior to attending OSU, she completed her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. And finally, today's third presentation will feature Abby Winrich and her presentation titled Evaluation of the OK.HAWQS Model Calibration for Water Quality. Abby is currently a graduate research assistant pursuing a doctoral degree in environmental engineering at Oklahoma State University under the supervision of Dr. Jamie Schussler. Her research focuses on the use of hydrologic models, erosion and sediment loading, and agricultural BMPs, or best management practices. She received her Master of Science in Environmental Engineering from Oklahoma State University and a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences with a concentration in Ecological Design and Engineering from the University of Vermont. Abby also served as a sustainable agricultural volunteer with Peace Corps Senegal and worked as a technician for the Western Rivers and Streams Assessment. In her free time, Abby enjoys exploring the dirt roads of Oklahoma on her bike and finding new recipes to cook. For more information about each presentation, be sure to review the attachment in today's calendar item. But thank you all for being willing to share your research projects with us today. And with that, if Maliha would go ahead and share your screen and start your presentation.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I am Maliha Tabassum. So I am presenting today on stormwater management for historic sites, a case study on green infrastructure at Washington School, Stillwater, Oklahoma. Urbanization significantly alters the natural landscape and it has a significant impact on stormwater runoff. On the left, we see a representation of natural pervious surfaces. When precipitation falls on such areas, most of it infiltrates into the ground, replenishing groundwater and reducing surface runoff. However, as shown in the right, urbanization leads to an increase in impervious areas such as roads and buildings. These surfaces prevent water from infiltrating into the soil, resulting in more direct runoff, which contributes to the urban flooding. A report by UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs in 2018 suggests that 55% of global population resides in urban areas, a figure that is projected to rise to 68% by 2050. Urban growth highlights the need for sustainable solutions to manage stormwater properly. So to manage the stormwater, we rely primarily on gray infrastructure. Gray infrastructure includes systems like pipe, channels, culverts that are designed to convey stormwater directly to a destination. These systems are effective in flood protection in many scenarios. However, the green infrastructures in many areas are aging and its existing capacity to manage larger volumes of stormwater is decreasing in areas across the country. They often comes with drawbacks such as faster flows and altered channels, which can lead to increased flood risk and significant water quality degradation. So to improve stormwater management, a modern and sustainable approach is established, which we know as green infrastructure. They use vegetation, soils, and other elements and practices to restore some of the natural processes required to manage water and create healthier urban environment. Instead of just conveying stormwater, it passively treats the water while managing the runoff. Green infrastructure helps to reduce the volume, peak flow. It also enhances infiltration, recharges groundwater, and ultimately improves water quality. Why is my slide not working? Sorry, there was some technical difficulties. Our screen froze here. So yeah, I will just go back. So these slides provide an overall representation of green infrastructure in an urban area. The green infrastructures can be used in a lot of different scales. It can be as simple as a rain barrel up against a house or a row of trees along the city streets or greening an alleyway. We can install permeable pavement instead of our regular pavement. The gardens can be turned into a bar retention cell or a rain garden. We can also install green roof on a like house or buildings. When green infrastructure is installed throughout a community, a city, across a regional watershed, they can provide cleaner air and water as well as significant value for the community with flood protection, diverse habitat, and beautiful green spaces. So the overarching objective of my research was to select and evaluate the performance of green infrastructure for managing stormwater runoff using a decision tree framework and hydrologic modeling. To do that, I divided my objective into two different parts. One was framework development and another one is framework application. Using diverse literature, we developed a decision tree framework for the selection of green infrastructure practices, and to apply the framework into a case study area, as in the Washington School, analyze 30 years of local rainfall data, that means the stillwater rainfalls data, to determine the rainfall pattern, and lastly, to apply the personal computer stormwater management model, aka PCSWIM, a modeling software to assess the impact of different green infrastructure practice on the site hydrology. Focusing on my first objective here, to develop the decision tree, I used published literature and design guidelines to select preliminary site conditions such as drainage area. In this process, 34 peer-reviewed journals and 6 different state manuals and 11 green infrastructure fact sheets from EPA were reviewed. After selecting these preliminary site conditions for each green infrastructure, I compared them with EPA guidelines and site-specific recommendations for different states. And then these 3 final criteria were selected and each GI was assigned to different categories. Now I am going to walk you through my decision tree framework. So the framework starts with the distance of any green infrastructure practice, the distance from green infrastructure practice to the existing structure or building foundation. If it is less than 10 feet, non-infiltration based practices are recommended. And if it is more than 10 feet, infiltration based practices are recommended. Because infiltration based practices allow water to percolate into the soil. If these are placed too close to a building, the increased water filtration weaken the soil around the foundation, leading settling, cracking, or structural damage. Next, we have the drainage area, which is categorized into 4 categories. And that means less than or equal to 1 acre, less than or equal to 5 acre, less than or equal to 10 acre, or no restriction, which means the drainage area may not have any effect on this practice. Following that, we have depth to restrictive layer, for example, groundwater table. For the most green infrastructure practice, the depth of restrictive layer from the bottom of the practice should be at least 2 feet. Because if the restrictive layer is too shallow, water cannot infiltrate properly and may pool within the GI practice, reducing its efficiency. Finally, we took a look at the slope of the site area, the percentage, and some practices may require low slope, whereas some practices can be installed into high slopey area as well. Based on this criteria, each GI was assigned into different categories. After developing the framework, we selected Washington School in Stillwater, Oklahoma as our case study and applied the framework on this case study site. Washington School was established in 1938. It was the first school to offer high school diploma to Stillwater's African American community. This school was centrally located in the floodplain and intentionally beyond both city limit and flood insurance bounds, an area residents refer to as bottoms. This development pattern is not unique to Stillwater or Washington School, as minority groups are forced to build communities in lower elevations and are disproportionately impacted by the natural disasters. This is the current condition of Washington School site, where flooding continues to threaten the integrity of the site. Historical photo archives suggest that the school was flooded during 1957 flood. Also, in more recent year, in the 2019, the school was flooded as well. Currently, Washington School Alumni Association is working towards revitalization and wants to turn this school into a community center. Green infrastructure will provide an opportunity to increase Washington School site resiliency in wet weather events while providing open green space for the community to enjoy as it did in 1940s. For this reason, this school was selected as the case study site. At the very south side of Stillwater in the floodplains, Washington School is located. In the middle picture, you can see this is the entire watershed of 465 acres, which was delineated by USGS Streamstat tool. Then I delineated the watershed into 14 smaller subcatchments with ArcGIS Pro. This is an aerial image of the site from current condition, and in 2023, an engineering firm proposed this site plan for future school area. The plan retains the main building while removing the peripheral structures. This approach will create plenty of space, plenty of green spaces, allowing to integrate substantial green infrastructure throughout the site. The Washington School area has 3.09 acre with an average slope of 1.5 acre. So as we have a case study and now we are applying the framework on our case study area, by applying the framework, we found the like the green boxes of green infrastructure, they can be installed in this Washington School site. But we wanted to refine further, so we have to look at the site specific condition. As this school is a very historical site, we told earlier, so we needed to preserve the historical significance of this school. For that reason, green roof might not be a suitable purpose for this site, because green roof is a thick and heavy weighted practice which has multiple layers, and the existing roof will not be able to hold that weight. Rainwater harvesting, on the other hand, is much more like a residential or commercial type of practices, and it requires frequent maintaining because the rain barrel can be filled pretty quickly when a storm event happens. So this is why we eliminated the rainwater harvesting as well. The permeable pavement was eliminated because the school is in the downstream. So essentially all of the water is like draining to this site, picking up the pollutants along in the way, which can clog the pavements really easily. As for the soil options, dry soil are much more similar to bioretention cell, but with a limited infiltration capacity. So bioretention cell seems more appropriate option for this site rather than dry soil, and wet soil is actually requires high maintenance, because if it is not drained within 3 days after filling, so it can it can actually promote mosquito breedings. So this is why these options were eliminated. Finally, we selected infiltration trench and bioretention cell for our further study. If we take a look a little bit more into the practices that was selected, bioretention cells are shallow landscape feature that captures stormwater runoff. They utilize biological and physical processes to improve stormwater quality and hydrology of a site. They are sized to capture runoff from small to medium storm events. Stormwater runoff flows directly into the soil, slowly infiltrates through the soil layers as shown in the pictures, which act as the filter. Some water is also taken up by the plants. The next practice is the infiltration trench, which are like narrow ditches filled with gravel that intercept runoff from upslope pervious areas. IT usually has multiple layers, starting with grass and then soil media, followed by a gravel and sand layer. They provide storage volume and additional time for the captured runoff to infiltrate native soil below. Now moving on to my second objective of my research. I looked at the rainfall pattern of Stillwater, Oklahoma to see which SCS rainfall type is best fitted for this region. I needed the pattern for hydrological modeling in the final and third part of my study. So the SCS rainfall method developed by Soil Conservation Service is to estimate rainfall distribution and runoff. This method used synthetic rainfall distribution pattern type 1, type 1A, type 2, and type 3 to represent how rainfall intensity changes over time during a storm. Type 1 represents low intensity, long duration rainfall, whereas type 2 represents high intensity rainfall distribution over shorter duration, which covers most of the US, including the Midwest, Gulf Coast, and Eastern regions. And at the very last, the type 3 represents a mix of moderate to high intensity rainfall with more prolonged peak, found in coastal and southeastern region of the United States. According to USDA, Stillwater falls under the type 2 rainfall distribution, and type 2 regions are very close to Pine County as well. However, with the changing climate, we are seeing many rainfall pattern shifts worldwide. So to investigate the actual rainfall pattern for Stillwater, I analyzed 30 years of historical rainfall data for this part. This slide outlines my methodology for the second objective. The process begins with the data collection and processing, where 30 years of 5-minute interval rainfall data from 1994 to 2023 was divided into 3 decades, and to identify any change in the rainfall over time, and also conducted the same analysis for the 30-year period as well. Following this, storm events are identified using a 6-hour gap, and the top 200 storms were selected per decade, as well as for the full 30-year period. Next, the selected storm undergo normalization, and the time and cumulative rainfall values scaled from 0 to 1 that allow for consistent comparison across the storm. Then the normalized storms were overlaid with SCS rainfall distribution, and root mean square error is calculated to quantify how closely observed a storm matches these standard types, with lowest RMSE indicating the best fit. The following equations shown in the slide was used to calculate the best fit curve, and all of this analysis was done in R programming. Looking at the rainfall analysis result, this is the first decade from 1994 to 2023. All 200 storms were categorized from low to high volume based on the total rainfall. Then each rainfall was compared to SCS type 1, type 2, type 3 to see which curve's RMSE value is low and best suited. This is for 2004 to 2013, and this is for 2014 to 2023. Now looking at the RMSE value for each decade, the result shows like SCS type 2 rainfall pattern is the best fitted for Stillwater with almost 80% type 2 storm for each decade. From 1994 to 2003 has like 76% type 2 storms, whereas from 2004 to 2030 has like 81.5%, and 2014 to 2023 has 79%. After this decade-based analysis, we also did the same analysis for entire 30 period of rainfall, which also indicates like SCS type 2 provides the best fit for Stillwater region with 79.1% of type 2 storms. Now moving on to my final and last objective to apply the PC-SWIM model to assess the impact of green infrastructure. PC-SWIM is a comprehensive modeling software developed by CHI that is used for simulating and analyzing urban drainage systems, stormwater runoff, sewer networks, and the impact of green infrastructure. My overall methodology for PC-SWIM model is this. I needed the drainage network, soil, land use, and design rainfall data, which were obtained from the various sources. In the next few slides, I will dig a little bit deeper into each of these data sets. This map shows the existing stormwater drainage network of Stillwater. The line represents the conduits, which means the underground pipes and the open channels. The blue dots are the junctions, which are the manholes, inlets, and curves. And the red triangle is the outfall, which is the downstream, and all of the stormwater goes into the end. The network was collected from city of Stillwater. However, there were some missing attributes for conduits and junctions. So we conducted several field surveys to collect those attributes, which included depth, cross-section, diameter, top width, and bottom width. And also the pipe materials for manning sand. Rest of the attributes were either assumed with standard value or analyzed by using the upstream and downstream attributes. One of the very important parameters for any PCSWIM model is the soil characteristic. The soil data I needed for each subcatchment. After dividing the watershed into smaller subcatchment, I have to calculate the attributes of this subcatchment, which heavily depend on the hydrological soil group. Hydrological soil group is a classification of soils based on their runoff potential, where it has four categories like A, B, C, and D, where A has the lowest runoff potential and D has the highest. In my watershed area, there were three types of soil, B, C, and D. The saturated hydraulic conductivity of a soil is a crucial parameter that describes how easily water can move through porous materials when they are fully saturated. All of these values were collected from web soil survey and SWIM manuals. Next, I needed the percentage impervious area for each one of my subcatchments. In order to do that, with the help of aerial imaging and visual representation, I created this land use map, which divided into 11 different land use categories, including commercial, impervious, industrial, open space, water bodies, and roads and highways. Each polygon was assigned a different card number based on their hydrological soil type and land uses. Then I created this pervious versus impervious map from where I got my percentage impervious rate. Finally, I needed the design rainfall for my hydrological model. So the design rainfall is the amount of rainfall used in planning and designing stormwater management systems such as drains, culverts, and flood control structure. It is based on historical rainfall data and represents a hypothetical storm event of a specific duration and intensity that a system should be able to handle. To design a rainfall, four types of data are needed: rainfall pattern, return period, storm duration, and total rainfall. From objective 2, we already found that rainfall pattern is SCS type 2. For storm return period, which is known as the recurrence interval, refers to the estimated frequency of a rainfall event of a certain intensity and duration. It is typically expressed in year, like 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. And this 5 return period was selected for my studies. And finally, I selected storm duration for 3 different storms, like 6 year, 12 year to 20 and 24 hour, to see how green infrastructure performance under different duration of rainfall. And we also got the total rainfall from NOAA Atlas 14 for each one of these storms. So a total number of 15 design rainfall were developed in this study, which is shown in the table. After getting the results from our our modeling, we needed to calibrate the model. So for the calibration of the model, a location was selected to observe flow during the storm events. This selected location is shown in the triangle in the map, which is the outfall of the watershed. The outfall of the watershed was chosen for model calibration because it represents as the final point where all of the runoff within the watershed converges, providing a comprehensive measures of the cumulative flow. A level logger was installed into the point, which is a device used to measure and record water levels, often in stormwater systems or groundwater wells. The logger was securely mounted on a metal plate attached to the channel surface. The cylinder sensor, shown in the picture, measures water depth. Now that I have all of my data, this is my phase swim model, incorporating all of the layered like subcatchments, conduits, and junctions. And then we created three scenarios. One is baseline scenario with no green infrastructure practice, and then is BRC and IT with bioretention cell and infiltration trench respectively. With 15 different design rainfall, total scenario simulation was 45. Total number of scenario simulation was 45. And each one of those green infrastructure was has an area of 0.039, which is the 10% of our site area, the Washington School area. This figure compares the total runoff volume for different design rainfall event, which undergo three scenarios for 24-hour strands. The result shows both GI practice reduce the runoff volume significantly compared to the baseline. However, their effectiveness varies depending on the storm's intensity. The BRC is effective for managing smaller to moderate storm events, but becomes slightly overwhelmed during extreme rainfall, whereas IT provides better performance under high intensity due to higher infiltration capacity. For 12-hour storms across all return period, the bioretention cell consistently achieve better runoff reduction compared to the infiltration trench. And for 6-hour storm, bioretention cell again outperformed infiltration trench by reducing the runoff volume from 53 to 80% across different return periods. The results suggest that bioretention cell is effective to manage stormwater runoff to smaller to moderate storms, but may not be as effective for larger storms. Comparing both practices' performance in the model simulation, bioretention cell clearly a better solution for this site in this study. Next, we measured the peak flow reduction. This figure compared the peak runoff rates in different design rainfall events under these three scenarios. For 24-hour storm, BRC shows similar trends like the reduction of total runoff volume. It was able to reduce the peak runoff significantly for smaller to moderate storm, but did not reduce peak runoff for 25-year storm. For 12-hour storm, BRC outperformed IT across all storm scenarios, reducing the peak runoff by 28 to 71%. Similar trend was seen in 6 hours, as well as like the 12-hour storms. BRC was the most effective in reducing peak runoff based on this study as well. This is my calibration results. So before I go into my calibration results, there are some limitations needs to be acknowledged. Our calibration period was from August to September. We only observed one rainfall event in that time period. So we only calibrated our model based on one rainfall event. So it has a NSE value of like 0.026. So a final conclusion based on this calibration result cannot be drawn or may not be appropriate to drawn right now. So the monitoring is currently ongoing, and we are looking at the other rainfall events as well. And we will be continuously monitor the flow depth and calibrated the model in the future as well to get a better performance in our calibration results. But the calibration result that we see in this slide is like it captured the hydrological trend of the flow really well, but it severely underestimated the peak flow depth. That can be happen for multiple reasons, like we only have one rainfall event, so there is no trend observed here. Second, probably there after we have the calibration results, we contacted OSU facility management, whereas we found some other drainage network inventory with a different stakeholders. So incorporating those may result in better calibration results as well. Having said that, so we are acknowledging our limitation of the study is like different drainage structure inventories are managed by various stakeholders, often with missing attributes in their network data. And PCSwim heavily depends on the hydraulics of the model. So that can be one reason to have that will be one limitation of this study. And the next limitation is the calibration used only 1 month of data, missing seasonal trends. So a longer calibration period would enhance the model reliability, which is ongoing currently. Key takeaways from my model is for my research is developing a tailored framework for selected effective green infrastructure practices for flood-prone sites, focusing on site-specific factors. Next, despite national trend of changing rainfall, Stormwater still has the SCS type 2, consistent and supporting reliable modeling outcomes. This is with simulation showed that bioretention cell is the most effective in reducing peak runoff and controlling volume for Washington school site. And with the combination of decision tree framework, rainfall analysis, and PCSwim modeling offer a replicable method for sustainable green infrastructure solution at other sites. My future recommendation for this study is we need a comprehensive and collaborative drainage network inventory. We also need to look at the seasonal variation of the rainfall affecting the model. We need water quality performance analysis for each GI. We also need to do cost analysis for HDI and identify suitable upstream location for green infrastructure practice to manage the stormwater runoff in the upstream. I'm sorry, I have no idea how my animation messed up here a little bit. Sorry for that. And finally, this is a summary of my whole research project. We developed a framework and then we analyzed our rainfall, developed a PCSwim model, and finally found the total runoff volume reduction and peak runoff reduction for green infrastructure practices, acknowledgement to National Park Service for supporting our project, and also to Washington School Alumni Association. Thank you. Is the question answer session right now or after all of the presentations?
I don't show any questions right now, so if someone has a question for the first presentation, be sure to type it into chat, but please feel free to continue on and with the next presentation. And if we get, as we get questions, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. So I am giving the floor to Nisha and Megan right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see our screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, awesome. So thanks everyone for coming in. Our presentation is titled Runoff to Renewals, Restoring NOC Enid's Stormwater Pond and Green Space. I'm Megan Ryan, as we were introduced earlier, and this is Nisha Bhatta. We're really happy to present today, so I hope you enjoy our presentation. So this is just a little bit of an overview about what we've done and what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about the current and desired recreational usage of the area, the ecological assessments that we've done, the flow and water quality monitoring that we're doing, the stormwater modeling that we're doing, and then the development of our restoration plan. So a little bit of an introduction to this area. So as you can see from this historic photo, people are using this area for recreation. They're swimming, they're paddling, there's a slide. It really seems like it's a community gathering place for people in Enid to go and enjoy the outdoors and participate in recreation. Another thing we can know from this photo is that people are paddling and there's also fish here. So this would kind of allow us to assume that the pond depth is adequate to facilitate these activities. Fast forward to today, the urban watershed has failing conveyance infrastructure around the pond. There's pollution going on in the pond, there's major sedimentation, there's algae blooms. As you can see, it lacks a riparian buffer. And all of these things combined kind of got the community thinking, and they complained to NOC about the pond stink, and they really wanted to improve this. So that's where they reached out to OSU and OCC to try and come up with a solution, and that's really what our goal is. So this is the inflow stream. As you can see, there's major algae growth, there's no riparian buffer. If there's any flow, it's not quite visible. And then the other picture shows the spillway that leads to the outlet stream. It's quite a steep spillway. We can also see that there's no water flowing off it continuously. We can also see below that there's major stream erosion going on down here. So lots of things to fix. So this is a map I created about the evolution of how this pond has changed in terms of the perimeter. So I was able to find some historic photos. I found an aerial photo from 1937 and 1954. And then I was able to find some other photos from 2008, 2013, 2017, and 2021. However, I think there's a few important things to note here. If we look at the 1937 photo, we can see that the inflow stream is much wider, whereas the pond itself seems to be much more narrow. And then fast forward to 1954, a similar shape, however, it is still changing, but we can kind of make out how this would change. And then if we fast forward to 2008, it's very different than what it was in 1954. And this kind of shape has continued until 2021, with some type of, I guess, erosion occurring. So I compared 1937 to the 2021 perimeter, and I found that this actually decreased by 754 feet over this 84-year time period. And then this kind of map is what I used to underlay those pond perimeter photos. There's a few important things to note here. We can note that in 1937, it seems as though the city of Enid is much less developed than it is in 2008 to 2021. We can also see in 1937 and 1954 that there's actually a walking path that goes all the way around the pond and the inlet stream, and that isn't present from 2008 until 2021. We can also see a slight increase in vegetation. There's a few more trees in the 2008 to 2024 series of photos than there is the 1937 to the 1954 series of photos. So here's two of the objectives we're going to talk about today and what we'd like to accomplish. We want to identify opportunities to increase recreational use and encourage habitat in and around the pond. And then our second objective is develop a green stormwater infrastructure plan for sustainable stormwater management around the pond. So, as we all know, green infrastructure are nature-based approach to stormwater management. They are often termed as nature-based solution or low impact development. And these are very beneficial in capturing and filtering stormwater before they enter our traditional drainage system. There's several benefits of green infrastructure, such as it helps in improving air and water quality, helps our landscape look prettier, supports biodiversity, and helps make our community more resilient against the changing climate. There's several types of green infrastructure, as you can see in this picture. There are green roofs, rain barrels, rain gardens, and all of them serve the same purpose, which is stormwater management. So for our study area, we have identified some potential locations where we are looking to implement green infrastructure. This is the outlet point, which is located south of a baseball field, and you can see there are several failed attempts at stabilization. They have added several drainage outlets. They try to stabilize this area to prevent it from being eroded, but it's not working very well. So in this area, we can add bioretention area, or we can also use a drainage swell. It will help in slowing down the water, which will help in reducing the erosion, as well as it will help the water infiltrate into the ground, capturing sediments and reducing the runoff volume. This is another area, which is a parking lot, also located very close to the same baseball field, and you can see several signs of washout. So when it rains, all of this gets picked up by the stormwater runoff, which eventually ends in the NOC pond. So for this, we can have a parking lot by retention. We can also opt for permeable pavement. But for this location, we are also considering relocating it to different location because this area is a little slopey. And we are planning to turn this area into more greener space. Another one is riparian buffers. So if you look at the first picture, when we started this project, there was no buffer area in this around this pond, and there was bank erosion going on. So we requested the NOC campus to let the plants grow and allow some area as a riparian buffer. And as you can see in the picture on the right, now we have plants that help in slowing down the water, capture some sediment and other trash, and also help reducing the bank erosion. Okay, so now we're going to kind of switch over to some of the baseline data that we've been collecting. So we wanted to get kind of an assessment on the community side. So we distributed an online survey that should have taken about 15 minutes, and it had 25 questions on it regarding a few things. So this survey was distributed to the NOC students, staff, and faculty, and it was also distributed to the community as needed via flyers. We received 197 responses from the survey, and we found the most people that answered were students, some faculty and staff, and a few community members. One of the questions addresses the current recreational usage. It says, if you or someone you know currently uses the pond or area surrounding the pond, what activities have you participated in? And it seems as though most people that use this area use it for walking. We have some people that use it for fishing, a little bit of golfing, and a little bit of dog training and biking. Another question regarding our recreation is we wanted to ask individuals, what is their level of satisfaction with outdoor recreational opportunities on the NOC Units campus? And from what we received is people are mostly neutral with the satisfaction of recreational opportunities. Some are satisfied and some are unsatisfied. So pretty neutral response for this question. And then to kind of develop our restoration plan, we wanted to figure out what people would want to see here. So question number 9 is, what additional recreational activities or opportunities would you like to see available in your community? And people responded they were pretty responsive to this question. People would like to see walking paths. They'd like to see picnic facilities, maybe some hiking and trail paths. We also want to be able to use the pond for recreation, some paddling and canoeing, fishing and swimming. So this question actually is really helpful in terms of what we can implement and what people want to implement here. In terms of infrastructure improvements, we asked this question. In your opinion, what infrastructure would improve the NOC pond and surrounding area? People mostly just want to see an improvement in the appearance of the area. I'd like to have some lighting here. Accessible bathrooms were popular as well. Yeah. And then as for the education type of component from our survey, the question 22 asked, how likely are you to observe or read informational signage, including environmental / ecology function of the NOC pond? And it seems that people would be likely to read the signs, which helps us to determine that it's okay to put educational sign up in the area. It's something that I was really hoping to do. So I was happy that people were receptive to this. And then we also wanted to know like how we could distribute kind of progress on our restoration. So that's why we asked question 24, which says, what is the best way to educate Enid residents on potential infrastructure improvements on NOC Enid's campus? And it seems as though people would be okay with this being distributed through social media. So as for the kind of ecological function of the area, I wanted to determine a few different factors. So I decided to set up different game cameras in hopes to capture wildlife activity on the area. So I had 2 game cameras. One was set up facing the pond, and then one was below the spillway, as you can see from these 2 photos. My intentions were just to capture wildlife activity. However, we actually were able to capture 3 things. Yes, we captured wildlife activity. We also captured recreation, the current recreational usage of this area. And we also captured some stormwater events off of the spillway. And this is the photo you're seeing right here. So as for the recreational usage that we captured on the game cameras, we found that people are mostly using this for running. And we have some dog walking and some walking. And then I also recorded what time of day people were using this area. And I found that the morning was the most active, some in the afternoon and a little bit in the evening. This data was captured between June 6th and September 2nd. As for the biodiversity that I was looking through, so we talked about how the game cameras were intended to capture wildlife, and they did. I combined this with visual observations to kind of get an assessment on the biodiversity. So overall, I found 66 different species within this urban habitat. And from this number, it seems as it's a healthy ecosystem. Something I'd like to note is recently I went to the pond about 2 weeks ago, and I actually saw that there was a goldfish in the outlet stream. So this might have been just someone put the fish in the pond and thought they were bringing it back to its natural habitat. However, I'm sure many of you know goldfish aren't native to Oklahoma. Another interesting thing I wanted to note here is that we found great horned owls on the game cameras. This is really important to me because great horned owls are a predator species, and this allows us to kind of determine a hierarchy system for this urban habitat. Something else that's interesting is we found Canada geese here. They were here when we first started going here for weekly activities in June. However, by mid-July, they weren't here anymore. And then about mid-October, they came back for some reason. And I'm really not sure why. There's a big gap in their residency here. So, yeah. An additional ecological assessment that I did was recording bird songs. So I used Merlin Sound ID, which is an app that records bird songs in the area and determines what species it is. So during our weekly site visits, I did a 30-minute recording each site visit, and I found 31 different bird species here. The most frequent species I found were the northern cardinal, the Carolina wren, the indigo bunting, and the American robin. So I think this is interesting how many different bird species there are here, but I also think this is a great talking point for education signage. This gives us a good opportunity to create signage around bird species and kind of educating the public about what kind of species are here. This is another assessment I did on vegetation. This is kind of an in the works assessment. I've only done one assessment thus far. So I took a 20-foot by 20-foot area just below the spillway in the wooded area. And I found that there were American elm trees, eastern redwood, and some juvenile red cedars here. I still have to do a few more assessments on this, but I think this is quite interesting and telling of what types of tree species are here. And then, as we noted in the beginning, there's major degradation going on in the outflow stream. So I kind of wanted to do a further assessment of this and really see what's going on here. So I found that there were also other areas of major erosion and bank erosion going on, which you can see in the red. I also found that there was areas of major stream blocking because of debris. This debris was fallen trees, branches, plastic pollution, some tires and things like that. And in these areas, it was completely blocking the stream and kind of limiting the flow. Something else I found was there was major water fluctuation areas. So I thought this was interesting to know because some site visits, we would go to these areas like right here, and there would be water here and it'd be half a foot deep. And then the next week we would go here and there would be no water here at all. So I think this is also very interesting and kind of telling of where the aquatic species will reside more frequently. And then I also wanted to determine where the aquatic habitats were and where I saw aquatic species. So green areas are kind of areas where I found fish, frogs, some snake species, yeah, and some aquatic invertebrates as well. So as you can see, there's major degradation going on in the outlet stream. So we've kind of come with a draft restoration plan to improve this. We'd like to implement a riser structure that this will allow us to reduce the flow of the outlet stream. And then our next step would be to clean up the debris in this stream. And then we'd like to decrease the slopes on some of these areas that have gully type erosion. And then in these areas, we'd like to implement live stakes, turf mats, and hard armor to kind of establish the vegetation here and make sure that erosion doesn't occur again.
Another part of the project that I have been working on is storm flow sampling. So we have been looking at the water quality and water quantity. If you look at the picture on your right, there's an aerial image of the pond, which shows the two sampling locations at the inflow channel and the outflow stream that connects to this pond. So at the inflow channel, we have a ISCO auto sampler, which is connected to a rain gauge, and it's programmed to get triggered by 0.1 inches per hour of rain events. So whenever it rains, the auto sampler gets triggered and it starts collecting the water sample. There are in total 24 bottles, and each bottle is capable of collecting 800 milliliter of water. And we also have a broad-crested weir, which is made out of wood, and we have installed it at the inflow channel. We also have a level logger, which is used for flow depth measurement, which is attached to this broad-crested weir. You can also see a floating intake. This is connected to the tubing of the auto sampler, which helps to collect the water from the surface of the channel. Then at the outflow, we have another auto sampler. This one is not connected to rain gauge, but this one is programmed to collect water sample in uniform time spacing. And the water samples are composite sampling, which means it collects 1 to 50 milliliter sample every 4 hours. So in total, 700 milliliter per bottle every 12 hours. And we also have a level logger installed at the outflow, which is used for water depth measurement. So these are some pictures from our fieldwork. In the first one, you can see our advisor, Jamie, installing the level logger at the inflow gear. And you can also see a lot of algae present at the inflow channel. We also did a lot of field verification of the storm network so that we can verify the size and other attribute information of these storm networks that are located inside our watershed. And we have been doing water quality monitoring every week. So we have been using a YSI probe to read some water quality parameters, both at the inflow and the outflow of the pond. So using the YSI probe, we are looking at the pH, nitrate, temperature, and dissolved oxygen. We were trying to see if we can see any variation in these parameters in respect to the rain event. And we have also been collecting grab samples during our each site visit, and we analyze those samples for E. coli. As you can see in this picture, there's blue spots with small air bubbles show the presence of E. coli. Other parameters that we're looking at are nutrients, which includes total nitrogen and total phosphorus, for which we are using reagents prepared by HAWQ. And then we are looking into total suspended solids and turbidity. So we recently started doing total suspended solids. So we are trying to find a relationship between the turbidity and TSS so that we can also get the TSS value for the previous samples that we didn't originally analyze for total suspended solids. So this graph shows the water quality variation at the inflow channel, and it shows dissolved oxygen, pH, nitrate with respect to the precipitation. If you look at this graph, we do not see much of variation in pH and nitrate, but we can see a lot of fluctuation in dissolved oxygen. We are not able to see a proper pattern with respect to the precipitation, but the variation could also be because of the time of sampling that we did, because during the daytime, there was a lot of algae present in the water, and during the daytime, the photosynthesis is going on, which increases the amount of oxygen that could have also increased the DO level. But if we look at this graph, we can see that most of the time, the DO level was less than 60%, and a lot of times it was less than 20%, which is very stressful for the aquatic species that have been living in this pond. This is another graph showing total nitrogen, total phosphorus, nitrate, and turbidity, but it only represents data for one single rain event, which was in September 20th, and it was a very small rain event of 0.11 inches per hour. And we can see initially the turbidity increased right after the rain event, and there have been a little bit of fluctuation. This is another graph showing the turbidity value for a recent rain event, which was on November 2nd. And this is very interesting because if we look at this graph, the turbidity was initially very low, but then it increased rapidly after the rain event, and then again kept decreasing. And after a big rain event, it increased again. So this shows how storm event can actually increase the amount of turbidity in a river system. As I mentioned, we have been doing the water quality monitoring both at the inflow and the outflow. This is a similar graph, but for the outflow of the pond. And here we have very similar results. And the dissolved oxygen mostly remained below 80%, with sometimes being less than 40%. This graph is also for the outflow of the pond, and this shows how turbidity changed every 12 hours. And this shows a rapid increase in turbidity right after a rain event. Graph is for the E. coli count, and it shows 30-day geometric mean of E. coli count. And if we look here in the month of July and August, the E. coli count exceeded the maximum E. coli limit set by Environmental Protection Agency, which is not very good. And recently we did sampling, which was on October 31st, and we observed lots of E. coli it was too numerous to count, and it was right after a rain event of 1.4 inches. Another part of this project is stormwater modeling. For this, we are using PC Swim, which is personal computer stormwater management model. And for this, we have added several parameters like rainfall, land cover, distal elevation models, soil type, drainage networks. And we created, so our main objective was to create two different scenarios, a baseline scenario that represents the current condition of our study area, and another one with the implementation of green infrastructure to see how it can actually help in managing stormwater runoff quantity and quality. So the main output that we can get out of this model is a hydrograph, which is runoff versus time graph, and a pollutograph that shows change in water quality over time. So first of all, we generated a watershed using a 2-meter resolution digital elevation model in the PC Swim. The watershed was pretty big. It is approximately 930 acres in size. So we classified it into smaller subcatchment, in total 16 subcatchments. And then we used hydrologic soil group data from USDA Sargo to identify the hydrological soil group classification in our watershed. And we found out that most of the area is group B type, which means moderate infiltration rate that ranges from 0.15 to 0.3 inches per hour. We also conducted an aerial photogrammetric survey with the help of Oklahoma Aerospace Institute. So this is the orthomosaic map of the pond area. It was very helpful to create a land cover classification map for the watershed. Our initial plan was to cover the whole watershed, but due to some visibility issues, we had to limit it to the smaller area. So as I mentioned, we created our own land cover classification map for better accuracy, and we divided the whole watershed into several land cover classes, such as commercial, forest, road, open space, and paved areas. We found out that almost 30% of the area is impervious in this watershed, which might not seem like a significant number, but one thing that we should keep in mind is that even if the area is classified as open space, if there is not much vegetative cover, it might not be very good with infiltration. And most of the area upstream of the pond was residential area with a similar development intensity. And this was specifically useful in calculating the curve number because this is the method that we use for runoff estimation in our watershed. So this figure shows the several drainage network. We got this data from City of Enid and we imported it into PC Swim. There were several drainage networks that had missing attribute information. So for that, we did field verification. We did some measurements. And in total, there are approximately 900 drainage networks within this watershed. And the flow and water quality measurements that we have been doing is going to be super helpful for calibrating and validating this model. And this graph shows the amount of water that flows into the pond during the storm events of different return periods. And you can see it's more than 300 cubic feet per second. For a pond of such small size and with compromised storage capacity because of lots of sediment deposited into the pond, it is quite difficult for the pond to handle. And most of the time when there's big rain event, the channel upstream of the pond always gets flooded. This graph shows the total suspended solids loading at the pond inlet for our 2-year 24-hour storm, and it's more than 100 milligram per liter.
Switching up a little bit to our site design that we created. We created this design mostly using the results that we had gotten from the survey. So we incorporated some educational signage in front of the pillars. We did some gardens around the pillars as well. We did a boardwalk / dock. With educational signage. I think this is also important to note that having a boardwalk or dock like this can kind of concentrate the disturbance of the pond where people can just all concentrate the fishing to this area. It also gives it something beautiful on the pond as well. Another thing we did was come up with a native flower garden area, which is right in front of the first bridge on the outflow stream. And then we designed a walking path that will go all the way around the pond. We also designed a portion of this to go throughout the green space. We were intending that the sidewalk around the pond will be paved, and then the other sidewalk in the green space will maybe be like a gravel or something like this. This is just some of the work we've been doing on the educational signage. So this is an educational sign that talks about the importance of rain gardens, what they do, the plant species that could go here, basically everything about it. This is a little bit of the history of NOC that we thought could go in front of the pillars. It talks about where the pillars came from. It talks about the history of the school and things like this. I think this is important because this is an old campus and there's lots of history here. This is a sign we created about the aquatic habitat at the pond. Here you'll see a green sunfish, one of the fish species I found here. Here's a red-eared slider turtle, one of the common turtle species in the pond. Here's some algae and duckweed that's here. There's a little bit of information about the riparian buffer and the importance of riparian buffers. So to tie it all together, we thought we'd include this slide to talk about our impact and the importance of what we're doing. So these pillars, like we talked about, they've got a long history. They're originally from the Enid National Bank, and they were gifted to NOC in 1937 by Chaplin Oil Company. And they've kind of incorporated these pillars to be a part of their school, and they represent 4 major themes of personal development: spiritual, intellectual, social, and physical. Now, as for our impact, we think that spiritual, this is a great place for people to reconnect with nature and recharge after their classes or in the evenings. Intellectual, this is on a college campus, so I think this is important to have the educational signage, giving the students a place to kind of decompress after a long school day. Social, we're creating a gathering place for the community. And physical, this is a place that can be used for recreation as we're trying to increase the recreation usage. So as for our project next steps, Nisha's going to continue to calibrate the Peace and Swim model. And she's going to develop the green infrastructure plan. I'm going to do further assessments on vegetation, and then these will be used in biodiversity calculations. Then we're going to collectively work on doing a project cost assessment, and then we will finish a final draft of our site plan. So we'd just like to thank everyone for listening. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to listen and answer them for you.
I don't see any questions in chat right now, but again, yeah, if anybody wants to type any questions in the chat, feel free to do so. But yeah, I think Abby has our last presentation. So Abby can probably go ahead and start. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm just gonna switch over. Working, can everybody hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. All right, let me. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Great. My name is Abby Winrich, and today I'm presenting an evaluation of OK.HAWQS model calibration for water quality. So watershed modeling has many applications for management. SWOT and other models like it have been used to predict stream flow in response to a large precipitation event. They can also be used to identify critical sources of non-point source pollution. They can also be used to test and evaluate different management strategies and BMPs. And they are also useful to fill in gaps where we don't have measured or observed data, or that data would be difficult to collect because it is in a challenging location, or it is just not financially feasible. So the way that SWOT-based watershed models work is you start with a pixel of a standardized area, and then you add in elevation. This model, HAWQS, uses the digital elevation model. And through that, you get the flow direction and path on the landscape. Then you add in land use data on top of that. OK.HAWQS uses the National Land Cover Database, or the NLCD layer. That gives you coefficients such as practice factor and curve number. And then in addition to that, you add soil data. This uses SERGO data from NRCS, and that gives coefficients such as soil erodibility, K factor, and other physical soil characteristics. Once you have the watershed built, it uses established equations to represent the watershed that you are modeling. And then you add meteorological data in addition to that to produce outputs at a daily time step. OK.HAWQS gives you an option to choose from 3 different raster data sets: NextRad, Prism, and it recently introduced future data sets, the CMIP5 data sets. So you can model into the future, I believe out to 2080 in the CMIP5 data set. These data sets allow you to generate outputs at the reach, the subbasin, and the hydrologic response unit level. So you get different levels of spatial granularity. And then you can also use the OK.HAWQS integrated data visualization tools so that you can immediately create charts and graphs to help you digest these data sets and help you use the data that you are creating. To produce a well-performing model, it needs to be calibrated. And this requires some sort of observational data set. And then you need to compare it against those model outputs. Then we can use some sort of test statistic to see how well the modeled outputs fit with those observed data. Common methods include NSE, Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency, KGE, King-Gupta efficiency, and then p-bias. And then this just compares how well those curves are fitting, how well the observed data is fitting the model data. And there are many papers that show us what good model performance is, but we don't know what goes into a model to produce that good model performance. One of the things that makes OK.HAWQS really fantastic is that it incorporates these calibrated parameters already. So there are 34 stream gauges and 18 calibrated watersheds. So if you are modeling within one of those watersheds or near one of those 34 stream gauges, you can choose those unique calibrated parameters and apply that to your watershed model. The data used for calibration ranges between 1983 and 2018. And the OK.HAWQS watersheds range from 100,000 kilometers squared to 500 kilometers squared. And the calibration points are not evenly spread throughout the watersheds, and they are also not evenly spread throughout the state. So there is a range of data available throughout Oklahoma currently. To address sort of the uneven calibration within the model right now, we designed a research project to investigate the calibration available in the model currently. So the first research objective was to develop and calibrate an Oklahoma-specific HAWQS model. Katie Mendoza and the team at Texas A&M have already completed that first objective, and they have OK.HAWQS ready and available on the website currently. The second objective is to assess the validity of the water quality outputs using just flow calibration as the mechanism. And then the third objective is to determine what that threshold value of calibration sites is needed to have satisfactory model performance in a watershed. So we know if we have that one calibration site at the outlet of the watershed, that we're probably going to have pretty good model performance right over here. But how is our model performance going to be all the way at the headwaters of the watershed out here? And how will that change if we add another calibration site over here? To start, we selected 5 watersheds throughout the state of various sizes. We selected these watersheds with a range of calibration points within these watersheds. The largest watershed in the study is the Cimarron River watershed. That's the yellow watershed on the top. This is just under 50,000 kilometers squared, and it has one calibration point within the watershed. And the smallest watershed is the Lime Green watershed, Walnut Creek watershed, and it is just about 500 kilometers squared. These range throughout most of the ecoregions throughout Oklahoma. And the watersheds with bolded NSE values have satisfactory watershed performance. And then you can see some of the NSE values are not bolded, and they do not have satisfactory model performance so far. So some of them are satisfactory with just that one calibration point, and some are not currently satisfactory and have multiple points of calibration. So there's a range here, and there's a lot of dissimilarities to investigate with this study. To assess the water quality, we are comparing against OCC data. So there are 146 monitoring points within these study watersheds, and they collect total nitrogen, total phosphorus, total suspended solids, and flow at all of these points. These measurements are directly comparable to parameters that the HAWQS model is outputting. You can see in the figure on the right how the HAWQS model is calculating these statistics. And then we are comparing them at each of the 146 points to see how the model, to see what the model is outputting at these points. And then we needed to go from OCC data to the model data to make the comparison. So OCC collects the data and stores it at the water body ID level. Nationally, we look at watersheds at the HUC-12 level, and those were spatially referenced. So we assigned all of the OCC points to their HUC-12, and then we looked at the comparison, we looked at the SWOT ID number and the HUC-12, and we matched those up. So we could assign the OCC data points to the SWOT ID so that we could make a direct comparison from the measured data to the modeled data. Then we had to calculate the distance from the measured points to the calibration sites. This was done by hand. Here you can see the calibration points are represented as stars, and then the distances were calculated in river kilometer. Upstream points are denoted as positive and downstream are denoted as negative. So these points would have a positive distance, and then this point downstream would be a negative distance. And then we can make a comparison of how distance impacts the correlation. And so the next steps for this project will be to determine the best performing water quality parameter in this flow calibrated model. And then from there, we can make recommendations for how to improve the model performance so that we can increase the usability for stakeholders in Oklahoma. If it's adding more calibration, changing the size of the watersheds that we are calibrating, or whatever that is, but we want to increase the usability of this Oklahoma-specific watershed tool so that it's easier to use for stakeholders and managers. Thank you very much, and I will take any questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Abby, and everyone. Learned a lot today. I really enjoyed everyone's presentations. So I still don't see any questions. You guys got several kudos on all the different presentations, but no questions. So I guess you guys just all answered all of our questions. So I was thinking about some things, and then the very next slide, it was like, okay, don't need to ask that question. So yes, great job. Thank you so much. I can hang out for another couple minutes. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type those into chat. Yeah, and if we have any questions that we get later via email, I can forward those on to Jamie or you, Abby. And yeah, you guys did great. So thank you so much. I did have one quick question. Oh, the Conservation Commission. I keep thinking of Oklahoma Corporation Commission. I was like trying to figure out which OCC it was. So I'm glad you had that on your slide too. See, you answered my question before I even could ask it again. So, all right. Well, still no questions, just lots of kudos. So good job, everybody. And
Yeah.
y'all, I think we'll go ahead and sign off, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca.
Of course.